Hello and welcome to Utter Punts. We have finished the regular season. We are into Wildcard Weekend, but before we start talking about any of the fixtures that might be coming up in the next few days, I think it's probably more important that we have a conversation about who's got a job and who hasn't. And, well, I don't think anybody's surprised at the first name that was gone, Jim, Doug Peterson.
It's the only surprise with Doug Peterson was that it took to the end of the season, to be perfectly honest. I mean, they were bad when they had Trevor Lawrence. They were bad when Matt Jones went in. He had a little bit of a renaissance personally, I think, at the back end of the season. But yeah, I mean, Peterson could have gone any time after week 8, to be honest with you. So that was the only surprise for me, that he made it through the season.
Dave?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. With like one of our sort of listeners, Pat, is a massive fan of the Jags, and all season he has been banging on about the pitfalls of trusting a gentleman called Press Taylor, who's the OC for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think most Jags fans wanted him fired pretty much from before the season began. What I would say is there is hope in Jacksonville, just simply based on the fact that Trevor Lawrence, although he's been getting injured and haven't been able to complete this season, when he was, shall we say, assaulted by a rival player, the Jags players went and stood their ground for him. They clearly love him. You don't get that kind of instant reaction from an O-line without there actually being some love for him. So there must be faith for him in that building, because you'd have thought that all of those pros in Jacksonville would be getting sick of the fact that they're just not achieving the things that the talent and definitely the draft positions from which they've been picking would suggest that they should be doing. So, yeah, at least Trevor's there, and what you need to do now is make sure you bring in someone and who can actually make life easier for him, because at the moment his career stats are looking suspiciously similar to Matt Jones and Case Keenum.
That's not a good place to be when you're paying a quarterback as much as you're paying Trevor Lawrence. I think he's $56 million a year or something like that to run that offense in Jacksonville. I mean, I saw today they're predominantly looking at defensive coaches for the opening. Robert Saleh they've requested for an interview, which the line that followed that was the Jets' performance at the end of the season after he got fired only got worse. So so I mean, that's an interesting justification for interviewing Salah. But hey ho, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Vikings blowing Flores in there for an interview at some point. But yeah, they seem to be those who seem to be the big names. Then you'll get the ones that are interviewing for all the other jobs as well, like Vrabel and people like that. So yeah, just Jacksonville is unfortunately in a bit of a mess at the moment, and we might as well talk about the one that did keep his job in Jacksonville, and that's Trent Baalke.
What, a man who has consistently been a GM on underperforming franchises.
Yeah, well, it's like one of those for Pat, isn't it? God gives with one hand and takes away with the other, and he gave him the firing of Doug Peterson that he's been calling for weeks, and Trent Baalke still has a job. Although I did see a funny interview with Shad Khan yesterday, who basically said if the new head coach that they get doesn't want to work with Baalke, then he'll fire him too, and not really taking into account that Baalke was sat next to him while he actually said that. So search that out.
Trent Baalke be leading the search for the head coach? I mean,
this is why
it would suggest that maybe there's not a standardised front office protocol being followed.
It'll be Shad Khan and Tony Khan who'll be leading the search for a new head coach. It's the billionaires' playground. So
interesting, because obviously we've heard what was happening with the Jets owner and him taking advice from his sons about which players to bring in the off season, based on, apparently, and it is allegedly, Madden grades. But he has also been in the dressing room telling people that they need to get fit and things like that, apparently, as well. So, yeah, all I can say is it doesn't seem to work out when GMs have been relying upon their heirs apparent to provide information. I hope that changes. Tony, like, we've actually met Tony Khan on a cruise, haven't we? And he's a really nice guy. Complete, yeah, absolute gentleman. So we do wish him the best and all that, but at the same time, I don't understand.
Yeah, true, mate.
No, I think he's doing a better job with his wrestling company than he is his NFL franchise, and it's not as though they're making particular headway these days either. So it would appear that the time has come to actually go and recruit somebody who looks at things through a slightly different lens for Shad Khan. But we'll see, yeah.
Any other head coaches disappearing that took you by surprise or didn't take you by surprise, Dave?
I was astounded that Brian Dabble, yeah. Brian Dabble, maybe that would be better for him going forward. Rebrand slightly. But I was surprised he kept his job, particularly the GM with the Giants as well. But what I would say is they are in a good cap space position. They have basically torn the elastoplast away, which was Daniel Jones. You've got dead cap to eat there. But you've got some players that you've drafted recently who are actually quite good up-and-coming players. I think Thibodeau, so long as he stays focused on the game, as soon as you're in a position where you can be a winning franchise, you'll see another level from him. I think he just needs to feel like there's a reason, and he'll get that adrenaline surge. Yeah. So.
And Malik Neighbours as well, I think, has sort of shone this season despite not having anybody, able to pick him out. So that could be interesting. What was really interesting is that complete freak win for the Giants has actually knocked them off the number one pick spot and sent them down to third overall in the draft. If they'd actually tanked correctly, it just goes to show they can't do anything right, the Giants. They would be in a really strong position going into this 2025 draft.
Well, only a front office can tank. Like Dan's made a valid point that you're not going to get a situation where coaches and players are willing to tank because they're playing for their futures, right? And we've seen it before with B-Flow in Miami, where he refused point blank, according to the current circumstances of a legal case between himself and the NFL. So we'll leave that one there. But yeah, essentially, you do have a situation where if you're going to tank and tank effectively, it has to be a decision which is not necessarily agreed to, but can't actually. There's not enough talent on the roster to do anything about it. The best tank that I've ever seen was it Shanty Brown when he was the Browns GM, and he actually did it properly with you guys, where you didn't win a game for.
Sashi Brown, yeah, Sashi 31 Brown. Defeats in 32 games.
That's how you tank.
That was the best of times, honest. But I mean, in terms of the Giants situation, I wasn't surprised that Daboll kept his job because I don't think Daboll's actually a bad head coach. I think he's been.
I agree with you. Only last season we were talking about him as coach of the year. That was the end of the last regular season, and how much of a good job that he'd done. This season, less so. But that I think you're right, Jim. I think there have been considerable obstacles put in his way.
Yeah, and I think ultimately those obstacles have been put there by a GM that hasn't done what the franchise has needed since he's been there. Malik Neighbours was not the pick that the Giants needed last year. They knew what they had in Daniel Jones. There were still two quarterbacks sitting there at the time in JJ McCarthy and Michael Penix. And Penix is looking good in Atlanta. Three quarterbacks if you include Bo Nix. So, taking a wide receiver in that situation was a questionable call. Letting Saquon Barkley go in free agency looks like an all-time blunder. When you've lost the 2,000 yards a year player, that's huge. And just overall, his roster construction hasn't been where it's needed to be since he's been there. He's responsible for the $40 million a year contract to Daniel Jones. So ultimately, I was surprised that Joe Schoen got to keep his job. I was thankful that Daboll actually did get to keep his job, to be fair, because I think with a competent GM, he would have a shot. But I do think they're maybe a little bit in the lame duck sort of area now, like the Jets were at the start of the season, where Salah went after, 6 games, and then their GM went 2 games later.
all about recruitment now, isn't it? For the Giants, it's all about who they manage to bring in, how they do those trade deals, whether or not they can pick up either Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders if they haven't both gone with picks number 1 and 2.
It's an interesting conversation in its own right, that, Liam, because like there's red flags all over the quarterbacks coming out in this class. You've got Shador, who obviously very, very talented, very, very articulate young man, but he's got the baggage of the fact that his father has been his head coach in college. No one really knows what to expect from him in terms of does he need to be involved in the organisation? Is he going to steer his son away from signing for a particular organisation if he doesn't like their setup? You just don't know with him. Cam Ward is a guy who, quite frankly, was right, in my opinion, to exit his bowl game at halftime. He wasn't quite as wise to dismiss the questions from the media as to why he'd done that, as it was a business decision you wouldn't understand. And that's not the major red flag I have with him. I think he's an uber talented young man. He's physically all the tools. But there's just little bits of body language with him where, for example, when he drops back in the pocket, if there's no pressure, he completely relaxes like it's a chuck-about game and just pops the ball off dismissively, like this is too easy for me, which I kind of love. But I can see it really annoying some coaches. I can really see it annoying some GMs. So I'm just intrigued because this QB class, it's not like last year's where we kept banging on about the fact there were some very good prospects, but statistically only 1 or 2 should be successful. And when you think about it, it was probably an amalgamation of 2 classes because of COVID, so you might get 4 who are successful. And it will be a legendary class if that's the case. If there's 5, it will be truly legendary. But this year, I'm not as convinced. And there are some quarterbacks who are coming back onto the market. I saw today that Derek Carr has no intention of taking a pay cut in New Orleans. That could lead to them cutting him, eating some more dead cap, and him being available on a veteran minimum. You've got Kirk Cousins, who, whilst he's got a no trade clause in Atlanta, obviously has done what Kirk Cousins does, gets them to nearly 500 and not quite made the playoffs. And then lost his job to Michael Penix Jr., but leaving the Falcons on the hook for, I think it's something ridiculous, like 60 million over the next 2 years.
78 million, I think.
So you're in a situation there where what you've actually got is some veteran players coming back onto the market. You've got some GMs that we've just discussed who are probably on their last legs, right? So they haven't got the time to go and sign rookie QBs and turn them around. Like, I can honestly see, particularly New York with the Ball and Joe Schoen, I can see them going, we need a veteran. So to bring this back to you, Liam, based on your sort of like watching of the NFL over the years, if you were given a choice of Kirk Cousins for veteran minimum, Sam Darnold, 40 million, Derek Carr, veteran minimum, what would you do? It's great question.
Take Jalen Milroe from Alabama.
Upside's incredible, mate. Upside is incredible with him. We love him, by the way. He's our little dark horse. Him.
Look, and I think it's really important. We'll definitely do something draft-wise a little bit further down the line because there's loads to talk about today. I just think Joe Schoen has definitely gone and done his due diligence. He's already made multiple trips to go and see Cam Ward and multiple trips to go and see Shadur Sanders. And I just wonder whether the draft position for the Giants might change their mind. And with Sam Darnold, who has done pretty well, maybe there's an opportunity to pick somewhere different. We shall wait and see.
One final thing on the Giants just before we move on. With Schoen and Dabble being straight on the hot seat, it for me the only way they can go is a rookie quarterback in this situation, and I don't think they'll
buy themselves time.
No, I don't think they'll be afraid to trade the house for it either as well. So
if they've got their guy,
well, if they have or if they haven't, it's the last roll of the dice, like we were just talking about. They could be out by mid-season if they just tread along, whereas if they're out by mid-season with a rookie quarterback, you haven't got that draft capital next year to spend anyway, so who cares? So the Giants could be one to watch to offload some draft capital to try and get into 1 or 2 for their pick of the quarterback. because quite frankly, the GM might not be there in 2026 to physically spend that draft capital. So what's it to him? And I don't think that can be a factor that we can overlook in this situation.
We shall have plenty more to talk about on head coaches and potentially GMs, and there's some coordinators that are shifting around the NFL as well. That'll all sort of come out in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be able to bring you all of that news here on Utter Punts. We are going to talk next, though, about the Wildcard Weekend and the fact that the Falcons didn't make it to the playoffs, just because that's going to keep Dave cheerful. All of that is coming up after this. Here at Utter Punts, we love watching the NFL with friends, and in our opinion, there's no better place to grab a bite to eat and watch the NFL than Beer Keller in Manchester. The burgers are massive, there's loads of HD screens, the wings are great, and there's a superb choice of drinks behind the bar too. Most importantly for us though, the people are brilliant. Like-minded NFL fans who want to enjoy the game and have a laugh. It's definitely one of the best venues to watch your favourite team in. Welcome back to Utter Punts. We were trying to make a decision on whether we were going to look backwards before we look forwards, or look forwards and then look backwards. We've decided that backwards and then forwards is definitely the way to go. So let's have a little look back at last week. Some results in there that were interesting. I think we start with the Falcons, don't we? Who fell at the final hurdle again.
It was incredible. 2 weeks out, they had their destiny in their own hands. They brought in their rookie QB, who looks good, by the way. It's not on him. If anything, they've definitely looked a more potent threat with him in at QB. But yeah, they managed to conspire to throw it all away once again. I didn't see much of it, but I was so happy.
Crazy high scoring game. It finished 44-38 to the 5-12 Panthers, Jim.
It was incredible, like genuinely. You know, you've got Red Zone on in the background, and every 90 seconds it was going back to the Panthers-Falcons game to watch. You know, the amount. It was the big plays. We've spoken about Bryce Young and how he's turned it around since he got benched and has gone back in. And I think this was another example of that being the case. It looks like the Panthers have found their franchise quarterback more by luck than judgment, I would suggest, because Andy Dalton was just that bad when they put him in. But yeah, I think the Falcons just wow. Like, they've got an expensive roster when you start to look at it. They've got a lot of high picks in that offense. You've got
took a running back. Was it 5? Or
yeah, I mean you've got Pitts. You've got Bijan at 5. You've got Pitts that they took at 6. They took Drake London with 5 as well, I think. So
it was definitely top 10. Yeah.
They've got a lot of that offense should be fairly high powered. I know they hired a defensive coordinator for their job, but ultimately that's got to get better. And Penix did well, and he's done well since he's come in for Kirk. It's the defense that's really letting them down, which was something they were hanging their hat on for probably the last season and a half. With their backfield's particularly good with Jesse Bates and is it AJ Terrell who plays at corner? I can't remember. That might be.
For Falcons, yeah, it's Terrell, isn't it?
So just underperforming. I was a little bit surprised that the Falcons guy kept his job after that, to be honest, because I think the Falcons have shown some interesting decision making with taking Kirk and then taking Penix Jr. high in the draft. So it wouldn't have completely shocked me if they'd have got rid of him. But I mean, he lives to fight another day.
It's one of them. Their GM, is that Mike Fontenot or something like that? I don't think that's quite right. Look it up for me then. It's got a name like that. I don't know why, I can't remember what it is. But he was the one who had to explain to his owner in the draft what he'd just done with the Penix Jr. pick. And clearly that hadn't been pre-planned or cleared with the GM, because he wouldn't have been so shocked. I kind of felt it was a great move. Like, if I was a GM of any team and my starting QB was Kirk Cousins, I'd always draft someone.
Terry Fontenot. It is
Terry Fontenot. There we go.
They're pretty close. That would, like, to be honest, Dave. I've known Dave for 20 years, and he can barely remember my name. So how he got that surname out of thin air, I don't know.
It's one of them. Like, it's because it's such a weird name, it kind of makes an impact. It needs to be like that wrestler Calypso.
Shut up, man.
But yeah, I mean, like, it is one of them where I don't know what the plan is, and if I don't know if I can't look at what a team is doing and go, right, I can see what they're trying to do, then they need to make changes. And like the changes that they need to make was simply not signing Kirk Cousins. I think if they if they'd had that extra 40 million, whatever they spent on him in cap last year, they could have supplemented their defence, they could have supplemented their offence, and they wouldn't have looked much worse starting Penix Jr. from the start of the season. But it would have tipped their hand in the draft if they were going to take a QB. I mean, if he did it just to disguise that, first of all, that was an outrageous move, Fontenot. But it was also done. You weren't being smart there. And the reason you're not being smart is because you've handicapped yourself in terms of cap at a point where your biggest advantage in that division, who's in their division, Jim? It's a load of teams.
The Panthers are in there, aren't they?
It's a load of teams that are struggling for cap space, or they've had to draft high recently. That division is there for the taking. And instead, the Buccaneers are there doing it.
It's Panthers, Saints, Buccaneers, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is.
the Saints are dying because they kept kicking the can down the road. They can't really afford to put a team out anymore. I feel sorry for Alvin Kamara, because by the time they're competitive again, he's going to be very far the wrong side of 30. And he's a guy who's got the same talent levels. And a lot of people will probably shoot me down for this, but I genuinely believe he's got the same talent levels as Saquon, McCaffrey and him. They're the top three backs in the league when they're allowed to do the things that they're good at. I've seen Alvin Kamara score 5 touchdowns in a game. I think it was against the Vikings as well. He is an unbelievable talent, but he's got nothing around him. Nothing around him. They're leaving him to rot there. It's a shame.
I think to just summarise on the Falcons, ha ha, is effectively it. And as a Browns fan, I'll see you in the top 5 of the 2026 NFL draft as well. So look forward to seeing you there.
I've got no arguments with any of that. I do wonder whether the Falcons head coach is Raheem Morris, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wonder whether, because he only took the job this season, they've given him the benefit of the doubt. Just going back to something that Jim said right at the beginning of this section.
Of other coaches. Jared Mayo didn't get the benefit of the doubt, did he?
No, he did not.
No, but I mean, he didn't win the games that the Falcons did either. I think they won, 7 or 8 games or whatever.
8 games.
8 and
9 they finished it.
Ultimately, I said this on the group chat the other day, is there just a lack of fresh meat out there? Because I think I watched Pat McAfee's show, a few other shows available, just for the record, and watched that. We watched that, and they had Adam Schefter on, and he said that there could be 10 or 11 head coaching vacancies, and altogether I think we saw 3. There was already the Bears and the Jets and the Saints that were already available, but on top of that we got Mayo, who else? Pedersen, and that's it to my knowledge so far. So
there's a few GMs shifted out, but yeah,
is there just a lack of fresh meat? I mean, like we were saying earlier in the season, that offenses have looked not as explosive this year as they have done in the previous years. Passing yard games at 400 plus have been an absolute premium. So, and new teams ought to hire, head coach, offensive coordinators for their head coaching position, especially
I think
QB.
Ben Johnson, the Lions coordinator. I mean, absolutely fantastic job he's doing there. He can largely call his number now, and if I was the Jags, that's exactly who I'd want. I'm so confused.
He can pick his team, to be honest.
Yeah, he can. For me, he's been waiting. What I don't think has come up though is that premium position, unless he sees the Bears as that, which is entirely possible. Sorry, let me.
I muted myself because I didn't want to disturb you while you were talking, but I was just going to say, what about the Bears? I wonder whether there is enough stock left in Caleb for somebody like that to go, I wonder whether he can run my offense. If I go and I want a really attacking side, whether Caleb might be able to do that job.
With what he's done with Jared Goff, I think you know, and as a first time head coach, the Bears is an ideal situation. They've got pretty close to a top 10 draft pick. They've got their two top 10 draft picks from last year, including Caleb, who, as much as we malign him on this show, if you just looked at his stats alone without actually watching him play, he's had a really good rookie season. The context that doesn't come with that is 90% of it's been in garbage time while they've been losing. So, I think
they beat the Packers.
They did.
Well done, mate. Well done. Delighted for you. Delighted for you. It nearly missed again. Imagine if that field goal had gone wide again and they'd lost on a game-winning field goal twice in the season to the Packers. But I was delighted for them. I was mightily amused by the fact that even though they'd only won 4 games, they're still due to pick number 9. Because strength of schedule being in the NFC North pushed them all the way down that category. So the 5th win didn't really make that much difference to them, and they got the curse. I don't think they'd beaten the Packers since 2018 off their backs. So, well done, Bears. Let's give them some nice news.
We're going to talk about the Browns in a second, but I've got a question that I don't know the answer to, and I wonder whether you two can help me out. This is one of those. I've not been watching the NFL for any great length of time, and therefore I don't know how it works. So, say, for example, we get to the playoffs, and essentially it's the first and second places, north, south, east, and west of the AFC and the NFC, right? Then the wild cards.
Explain it, mate.
Yeah, and then what I was trying to get at is, what if you've got 2 teams that finish on the same record? How do they figure out who goes through?
Okay, so I'll quickly run through. Jim, you correct me if I get it wrong. This is a nice test of my memory. So you've got your 8 different divisions. From those 8 different divisions, every single team that wins their division, they will get into the playoffs, and they are guaranteed a home playoff game, right?
That makes sense. All right, what if 2 teams finish on the same record at the top of a division?
So it would depend on the tiebreakers within the division. So, for example, if you both finished on 16-1, right? Well, that doesn't work. If you both finished on 15-2, but what the team that had came top had won both the games against the team who came second, it would go on the head-to-head between them. If they've both won a game each, then I think it goes into the strength of schedule bit, which is basically there's a score allocated against each team before the start of the season regarding the strength of the schedule that they're going to face. It's how they do the fixture lists. So, a first place team will get a first place schedule for the rest of the season, and where there's minimal crossover games, they'd be playing the stronger teams in the division against which their division has been matched up. But essentially, it comes down to your overall record, then your record within the division, right? And then after that, it goes to strength of schedule. Another tiebreaker that slides in between the divisional record and the strength of schedule, is actually NFC or AFC wins. So you have the same number of losses, but one team had lost to a team within the AFC and they were within the AFC, but a team within the AFC had lost to an NFC team. The defeat against the NFC team will count less. And
so
then
2 + 2 equals 5 in a nutshell on that. But Dave's nailed it in a lot of words. But yeah, I think it basically, in summary, it's the top teams in each division. Strength of schedule is a tiebreaker. AFC versus NFC and divisionals as your tiebreakers, and that's how it splits down. And obviously that was the situation the Vikings and the Lions were in before they played on Sunday, to be fair, and that's why Vikings held number 1, their first place, until they got absolutely massacred in Detroit, worse than a Browns score. I think it's
I was so glad I was ill, mate. It only happened because I was ill. I went on it. I won't give him the... Do you want mute? Liam, you on mute?
I'm so desperately trying not to disturb you that I keep muting myself. We're going to talk about the Vikings, but I'm saving it till after we've spoken about the Browns. Sorry, Jim.
I mean,
I just got my licks in there first. That was what it was. I mean, I've kind of warmed the oven now, so we'll just let it bake for a bit, and then then when it's ready, we'll let the stench percolate, and then we'll talk about it after.
I'm not sure you're allowed to mock the Vikings, bearing in mind you've been advocating or signing Sam Darnold to a multi-year deal.
I personally am not.
Yes, you were. Yes, you were.
No,
only to annoy me, you were. So shut off.
How much it will drive you nuts. I hope they overpay him as well with 60 million a year.
But I have a plan. The plan is working.
300 million guaranteed is the ideal Sam Darnold outcome.
We've sidetracked this. That's
Well, talk about the Browns.
That's why I'm really glad that he's going to the Giants, probably. But anyway. Anyway.
Don't put this on me.
We've got to talk about the Browns. What happened to the Browns, Jim?
Injuries.
Mate, you had, like, as far as I'm aware, your third best season since I started watching the NFL with you, because you got the third overall pick and you were so close to number one. Oh, no, you got two. You got two, didn't you?
We did.
Oh, you lucky guy. You tried that away for King's ransom, but you start telling everyone that Cam Ward's awesome and not a dickhead at all.
I haven't got much to add to that. To be fair, we're bad. I was pleased that Stefanski didn't get canned. Andrew Berry, I think, is quite a lucky boy, but at the same time, I think this is probably evidence that the Deshaun Watson fiasco at Cleveland probably.
I feel that the owners held the gun to his
wasn't
head.
the doing of Andrew Berry.
Jimmy Haslam is that the owner?
Yeah, that's he was there with his gun to Ray Farmer's head to draft Johnny Manziel because a tramp told him to do it while he was in New York and he was walking into the building. So
these people are in charge of billion-dollar organisations.
Could you imagine this? I mean, to be fair, I mean, with UK politics, I think if we got some homeless people on in the House of Commons, then we could probably move the country forward at a significant rate compared to where we are today.
I think it's sensible, given our track record, not to talk at all about politics on this podcast. Let's move swiftly on to talk about the Ravens, who I think might just be coming good at exactly the right time. At that combination of Lamar Jackson having to do less of the legwork because Derrick Henry is an absolute animal, I think is really promising for them going into the playoffs.
Yeah, you could say that, but about Bartlett.
Yeah, I'm not a Ravens fan, to be honest.
I fell 100% Bartlett. Last year was the year for them.
We'll wait till Dan's here on Monday, shall we?
Isn't it more fun to tear it up and reference it back
let's
to
do that. They've got the Steelers that they've handled in the last few
they
weeks.
should be through.
Yeah, but no, the Steelers are coming off 4 straight defeats, so obviously the Steelers are going to beat the Ravens at Wildcard Weekend.
By a point.
Yeah, I would. Well,
because of a failed 2-point conversion.
I hope so.
Oh my goodness me! You two are for the high jump. I swear. I'm not even going to. I'm just going to let him deal with you next week. That's the easiest thing to do.
Look forward to it.
Let's
good to see you, Dan.
Let's talk about the Vikings, Dave, shall we? Because the Lions definitely handled the Vikings on Monday.
They did. They smashed us. They got every call. I didn't really like. Oh, it's one of them. I'd like to argue against it, but like all season, I've been waiting for Sam to be Sam. So like,
do you want
it's not
a little
surprising
bit of,
it happened in the big game.
A little bit of sugar just to counteract that bitterness there, Dave?
No, I'm fine with it. I am honestly fine
He's
with
fine with it because he wanted a Sam Darnold meltdown, so they don't pay him 60 million a year and 300 million.
I was so happy, and it happened in the main season.
He regressed to prime Carolina Panthers and Sam Darnold for one night.
And it was needed because Vikings fans, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. There's a reason they've not won an NFL Super Bowl, and that is because they are the most dedicated followers of fashion I've seen as a fan base. Like Darnold flashed in a system that was designed around him for one season, right? And they're like, oh yeah, let's give him the entire King's ransom because we don't have good quarterbacks here. Let the coach who's taking these diamonds in the rough, I went nice there, and honing them into actual diamonds. Let's let him take someone from the start who's not been ruined by anyone. Who's
only got one leg.
Who's only proved he's fine now. Have you not seen him?
No, one leg.
No, it's fine.
Hop along, mate. He's the Michael Wood.
He's not. No one in the world is getting that reference, Jim. But Michael Wood is a friend of ours whose nickname is the Sniper. Sniper's nightmare.
Oh, because he walks with a limp.
Yeah, because he's got one leg shorter than the other, and he's having operations to get that rectified. And by the time they finished, he's due to be 6'8" because they asked him how tall he wanted to be, and he was like, "I want to be 6'8" so that I can go."
But with really tiny arms,
tiniest
like
arms.
a T-Rex.
Yeah.
So they're taking bone from his arms and adding them to his legs to increase his height. But he's going to go around calling himself a dinosaur from now on, and get himself into.
Shout out Woody. Anyway, back to drag leg McCarthy. So yeah, no, I don't want to talk about JJ McCarthy with Dave anymore because I just genuinely get shouted at in a 4-minute monologue.
I tell you what, instead, let's flip it and talk about Jahmyr Gibbs because. What a game from him. Absolutely brilliant. 28 touches, 170 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 of them on his legs, 1 receiving. It was a standout performance from Jahmyr Gibbs.
It was a hell of a game called by Ben Johnson, to be honest. I think we need to, I think you saw how the Rams beat the Vikings and and obviously how it happened with the Vikings earlier in the season, and he really built on that game plan and delivered a really solid game plan. There were concerns before the season around the Vikings' ability to stop the run sometimes. I think largely they've done a really good job about that this season, but it unfortunately just came unstuck against the Lions. But credit to Jahmyr Gibbs, looked really good in his last college season at Alabama. Went to Detroit in a bit of a head scratcher because they already had a running back when they drafted him.
David Montgomery, they're going to pay both.
And
goes to show do you remember when we talk about the trainers of the NFL and everyone was saying the running back position, what they've done is given themselves a stud stable. Doesn't matter which one's on the field, you've got to worry about them. They've got slightly different strengths. Tip my cap to Gibbs because he carried the load while Montgomery is out. But that guy, he either tore or strained his PCL or MCL, and he's talking about being back after the bye now. So... Wow. Like, they're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to have their sort of two-headed backfield back. But yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs is a great player. I'd still question spending, number 8 overall on a running back.
I can't remember.
But there you go. Yeah, it was 8 or 11. I can't remember which, and I know it is one of those two.
Ultimately, probably the best offense in the NFL, and for most of this season, points scoring, variety of plays, and all the rest of it. And that's why Ben Johnson's probably the biggest candidate on the head coaching side of things. Dave's frowning because he loves Kevin O'Connell.
No. I was frowning because I checked when Jahmyr Gibbs was taken, and it was actually
15.
12. It was 12.
Right.
Yeah.
But ultimately. Yeah, look, I mean, a bad day at the office for the Vikings, a good day at the office for the Lions. To be fair, with what Dave said at the start, the Vikings didn't get any calls. The Lions got all the calls, which Chiefs fans are used to, but everybody else in the league.
Do you know who else is used to it? Massively, because I've watched a few of their games this year. I have noticed that the other purple also get treated with massively preferential treatment by the refs. Every game. Oh, God, yeah, it's holding on every offensive play for them. And it just goes completely
they're
on call.
Absolute filth.
But I now understand as to why Dan got so upset when it happened against the Chiefs, because they're just not used to it, man.
Yeah, no.
Like the umpires, the refs are always on the side of Ravens.
Cast that line out. I understand what you've done. I'm calling it there. We will sort this out next week. All right, next week. We're going to talk about the Wildcard Weekend coming up after this. If you're anything like us at Utter Punts, we love the fantasy games surrounding the NFL, but sometimes they're a bit too focused on their American audiences. That's why we were blown away when the Fantasy Game Day app rolled into town. A weekly fantasy game with player values in pounds, totally dedicated to the NFL's UK audience. There's insights and analysis and plenty of opportunity to compete with your friends, but the best bit, weekly cash prizes. Use code PUNTS when you sign up for a free entry after you play your first week. Welcome back to Utter Punts. We are just going to have a little bit of a look ahead now to the Wildcard Weekend, 11th, 12th, 13th and 14th of January. Loads of fixtures in there. Some of them look quite tasty. Have either of you got one that you've spotted that you think to yourself, yes, absolutely, I shall be watching that one?
Steelers, Ravens. Sorry, I was joking.
Expect the Steelers to crush the Ravens. Anyway.
Yeah, sorry. Well, stop it, Dave.
Pair of dickheads.
Yeah, I know. Hold on. I'll sort it out. The Chargers versus the Texans. I'm intrigued by
Okay.
that. Right now, you've got obviously the Texans have made it to the playoffs. Stroud, we all kind of agree, has had a bit of a regression this year. I potentially think that this regression could be good in the future because I feel like this is the year where he's been trying to expand his horizons and run much more of a professional offense. He had to do this. It was going to happen at some point. The risk with him based on the what was that QB testing that he flunked and everyone basically tanked his draft stock.
The Wonderlic test.
Yeah, no, it wasn't Wonderlic. It's the one I replaced it with, the S2 or S3 or whatever it's called. But anyway, S2, right. So like they basically he didn't do very well in that. People expected him to not be a very good quarterback as a result. But last year he was absolutely amazing. But they were using a simplified offense that played to his strengths. This year they have attempted to expand what he can do, and he's not processing as quickly. I don't think that's going to be a helpful thing against the Chargers. So, because the Chargers defense is flying around now. And not only that, their offense is becoming effective. I wouldn't say explosive, but effective. Like watching Justin Herbert, who's like a huge guy. You just never seem to play to his athletic like potential, but now he's looking a lot more like Josh Allen. He and potentially might even be a better pocket passer than Josh Allen. So if Harbaugh can unlock that potential there, I honestly think that the Chargers could be something of a dark horse. Like Harbaugh is used to winning. The only person in the NFL who could have countered that injured his knee in the pre-season. Be back next year. That's JJ McCarthy, the man who helped Harbaugh win. And so we've got a situation now where I honestly think the Chargers are a team that I actually fancy to be a little bit of a nightmare for everybody that they're gonna go against. They have experience playing against the Chiefs this year. And it's really hard to beat teams over and over again. So it's going to be an intriguing one. I'm hoping that we see CJ Stroud back to his best. He had a break at the weekend. I don't think they played him, did they? They've had Davis Mills out there. And was it Joe Milton as well?
No, that's Patriots.
He was out there, though, wasn't he? I'm sure I saw him at some point. But anyway... They basically gave him a little bit of a break. Maybe that'll give him time to recharge and build up the confidence again a little bit. He's got Nico Collins back. Obviously, they're missing Diggs, but like for me, it's an intriguing game. That could go the way of being close, and either team could win it. But if it's a blowout, it will be the Chargers. And if the Chargers can put 20 to 30 points on them, not really concede many, I think that'll send a warning out to the rest of the AFC that there's a team that's coming to win and are physical enough to really hurt people in the playoffs.
I think, I agree with what you've said. I think CJ Stroud hasn't looked the same. I mean, he wasn't having his best season this season, but then with that gruesome leg injury, was it to Tank Dell? That we saw when we were watching the game, that just seemed to evaporate his want to play for the rest of the season, and genuinely,
I think he blamed himself, but he shouldn't. If it's a nasty hit from behind against an unprotected receiver's leg, and
it was horrifying. Yeah. But
I think not deliberate, but you can't blame the QB.
I think that's nuts him a bit, but. Yeah, I think for me, the Chargers all day long in that game. But it is one of the top games this weekend for sure. And I think the spread betting would pretty much back that up. I think the Chargers are favoured to win by 3 points as it stands today. I mean, for my choice, it would be the Packers versus the Eagles or the Vikings versus the Rams. Packers-Eagles is... Maybe it's not. It doesn't have the level of shine it would have done if the Packers would have done their job and beat the Bears at the weekend when finished the season strongly, but that they didn't. And the Eagles have had just been a bit up and down all season. To be fair, and I read today that Sirianni's seat is still very hot. So if they end up losing to the Packers at the weekend, don't be surprised if Sirianni's out of a job.
I'd expect that because there is no way that the Packers should be beating that Eagles team.
I agree. And yeah, look, we are where we are. Saquon's had a week's rest. You'd expect the Eagles to roll the Packers, but a good game nonetheless. 9:30 on Sunday, that one is. And the other one, Vikings Rams. Earlier in the season, the Rams had the formula to beat the Vikings, one of the few teams that did. But I think we've seen in general the Vikings' ability to adapt from what they've done. That obviously that goes counterintuitive to what we saw against the Lions, 39 points. But there we go. But ultimately, yeah, I think that the Vikings Rams is probably the closest game on match of week, and that's reflected again by the fact the Vikings are favoured by 1.5 in that game. So really good game to close that weekend out. 1:15 on Monday, 1:15 a.m. on Monday night for that one. So yeah, look, I think the Vikings Rams is going to be the game of the weekend, and then Packers Eagles and Chargers Texans. They're the three from me that I'll watch.
I will be keeping a little beady eye on Broncos Bills. I think just because last time out that game was far tighter than it should have been, and I just want to see whether the Bills are just going to
beat the brakes off them, or it's going to be tight again.
Whether it's going to be tight again, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one.
Was it 24-22 last time out? It was only like a 2-point game, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think if the Bills destroy the Broncos, that'll be a real statement.
Yeah.
Because the Broncos are actually a pretty good football team.
Defensively, very.
As much as I don't like to give Sean Payton any credit, you have to in this situation. You know, swapping out Russell Wilson for Bo Nix has looked like as pretty much a masterstroke, to be fair. He's probably the only one in the league that believed in him. So it'll be a really interesting one. If the Bills destroy them, then that's a statement. If the Broncos beat them, then that makes the Broncos a more dangerous proposition than perhaps we're currently thinking they are. I don't think they're... I mean, when you look at who plays who after this wildcard weekend, those matchups are the really enticing ones, to be fair. And get another week down the line.
I'd definitely argue that the Broncos game against the Chiefs shouldn't be counted as a sign of things to come, because that was effectively against the XFL Chiefs, if you like. It was not the full Chiefs.
Carson Wentz special, let's be honest.
Yeah, so I'm not particularly surprised that they beat the brakes off the Chiefs. You have to question whether or not that was just a sign, though, that Patrick Mahomes fears Joe Burrow. I don't think Patrick Mahomes fears anything or anybody, but I do think that there was... definitely very pleased to be in a position where they weren't playing for anything at the weekend and could basically make sure that the Bengals didn't make it. Right?
One of the reasons that I didn't even bring it up, to be honest, is that I looked at who was playing and went, I'm not sure it's actually a story.
Yeah.
I don't think it is a story, but at the same time, do you really want to be going into the playoffs off the back of a 38-0 loss? I personally not. I mean, I know the players weren't the players on the field, and I know that it's just from a momentum perspective. I think we've seen when the Giants have won their Super Bowls.
Momentum? Does momentum exist? No, we'll save this for Dan again. Carry on, Jim.
Not even here.
Oh, no. Go on.
And I think, when we've seen the Giants and stuff win Super Bowls, it's been down to momentum and then picking it up towards the back end of the season and getting to where it needed to go to. So
when the Packers won it as a 10-7 underdog, yeah.
Yeah, so look, it is what it is. I don't put too much stock in it, but I think if the Chiefs do lose in the next round of the playoffs, then there'll be questions asked about that game.
So, Bill Belichick said something, didn't he, last week when they were talking about whether or not players should be being rested going into these last few games. I think it was on Pat McAfee show, and Bill Belichick basically turned around and went, "Look, I never did it, but I never did it because all of my players always wanted to play." And what it became then was very much a problem if I was turning around to my team and I was saying, look, I know they want to play, but I care about them more than I care about you. So I'm going to rest them, but I don't really give a shit about the rest of you. And I thought it was a really good sort of display of the psychology of how he does things. He wants people to feel like they're part of a collective. And like, even though he had the best quarterback ever, he still made Brady feel like he was responsible to the collective. And maybe that's something which Andy Reid hasn't done here. But at the same time, I think both Mahomes and Kelsey in particular were banged up. I think they needed the break. And I think getting them a 2-week break and getting the batteries recharged it could well end up paying dividends for them. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Look, I thought we'd finish the podcast this week by talking about the players that we're not going to see in the Wildcard Weekend or the playoffs, the players that didn't make it. So the best players that you can think of that are really unlucky, really, to not be in the postseason.
So straight away, I'm going to say his name because he's been good to us and we will miss him. Nick Bosa, mate, gutted you're not there. Yeah, even though I hate your team, gutted you're not there.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Jim?
I mean, I could stick with some other 49ers players, but for me, probably the biggest one's Joe Burrow. MVP level standard of a season. And then obviously to have the Chiefs purposefully capitulate to the, I think the Chiefs, just hilarious as a Browns fan because we're bad and you have to laugh at other people's misfortune to make yourself feel better. So yeah, Burrow not there. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins.
Jamar Chase is the one for me. The first recipient of the Triple Crown in 4 years, 3 years, 4 years. First in receptions, first in receiving yards, first in receiving touchdowns, not in the postseason. Unbelievable.
So had anyone done it before Cooper Kupp did it? Like, I'm not sure anyone had ever got the Triple Crown before. And then Jamar Chase has come. It's a little bit like the 4 minute mile, I guess, with Jamar Chase coming along and doing it just after him. But it does seem a bit ridiculous. But at the same time, what are their tight ends? Chase Brown and running back, was it? Okay. It's not exact. They have got so much money. In fact, it's not true. Had they signed one or two of their wide receivers to the extension, I could understand why they are where they are, right? But this is still prior to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase getting paid. Like, T. Higgins could be walking away for nothing because I won't be able to franchise tag him again because it goes up by half of the franchise tag value that he had last year. So they won't be able to franchise tag him again. So he could end up walking for nothing. And it just seems like an amazing quarterback with an amazing offense's shot at this got robbed by underpreparedness, because don't forget the only reason they didn't make the playoffs is because they lost the opening game to the Patriots.
Well, this is it, and they lost. I think they went 0-2 or 1 I don't know, and then I think it was 1-4 to start the season. Again,
and they always start like that.
Yeah, they start badly, and I think they've fired their defensive coordinator yesterday, and he's been scapegoated for that poor season, despite having Trey Hendrickson as the NFL sack leader. So look, I mean, I think
they haven't got that much talent on that defense either. No, Trey Hendrickson and really Sam Hubbard, and I think that's it really.
I think the Bengals are just, the Bengals are in a difficult position, especially with their head coach. We've suggested that he could have been on the hot seat. He wasn't. He hasn't ended up being.
We thought he should be, right?
Zach Taylor, just not an inspirational man.
But I also did say to you, they might not do it because they can't afford to. Like, you can't run your franchise like that. You can't have so little money that you can't afford to take effective decisions.
One of the most frugal franchises, and that's proven by the lack of extensions and the lack of big name free agent signings. When we look at the other players not in the playoffs, Micah Parsons, CD Lamb from the Cowboys, I think that's a bit of a miss, to be honest with you. I mean, Alvin Kamara at the Saints, Dave gave such a glowing reference to earlier, so yeah, I think that's another one. I mean, who else have we got? I mean, there's no one.
There's so many, isn't there? It's just it always seems a bit of a shame that we are without those excellent players in what is the sort of showcase of how good the NFL is over the course of the
Williams,
season.
his legendary rookie season has gone to waste and everything. So
no, I mean, like the thing is, there is so much talent around the league. It's meant to be a parity league. What I would say is, I'm not sure it is a parity league. Based on one thing and one thing alone, and that is with the playoffs, right? Once you qualify for the playoffs, it's what we were talking about earlier. If you win your division, you automatically go into the playoffs. That now means you're not picking anything lower than 22, right? And you're getting a home game, right? So you're suddenly having the odds stacked in your favour to potentially then get through a little bit further. The further you go in the competition, the less chance you have of getting the players that you actually want to supplement your squad. So if you overperform for a year, i.e.
like the
Vikings or the Giants, right?
The Ravens.
You having the odds potentially start. I mean, the Vikings threw away their advantage by losing to the Giants, but that's not the point. The point is, you're almost getting a favourable outcome at that point when you're hitting the off season, and that actually throws it into a skew. So, for example, if you were to look at this season's records, the Vikings are sitting there in 14-3. We go away to the Rams, having just had our asses kicked by the Lions. We're on the road again. We could potentially get our asses kicked by the Lions again. Then we're going to be one of the first teams out of the playoffs, and we're going to end up picking around the 20s. And yet the Rams, who talent-wise probably aren't in the same echelon, they're going to move up and have a lesser draft pick than us. So I almost feel...
won games. That's
yeah, no, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's fine. But what I would suggest is, and this is, every team that wins their division should be guaranteed a playoff game. But they should stack it based on record as to who gets the home games.
Because it would have suited the Vikings this
No,
year.
I'm not even talking about that this season. I mean moving forward. Because, and besides which, the way the Vikings lost to the Lions, who we ended up playing because it's a Monday night, that does give us our best chance of getting through because it's the longest gap between us playing the Lions and having to play. I'm glad of that draw, if you like, even though you've got teams that could potentially be considered weak. I think we'd have lost to the Bucks, for example, if we'd ended up playing them. But it's just that it's that piece where you're like, as soon as you start handing out advantages, you're no longer actually given a parity league. I understand the point of the division is to keep each of the teams with a rooting interest throughout the entire season, and so no one gets cut away at the back end. But I do think that there's certain things that they can do to increase the levels of competition rather than
maybe this is something we could have a more in-depth conversation about when we've got a little bit more time. But unfortunately, time has beaten us. So.
Sorry.
It's fine. No,
for the record, I don't agree because it would have favoured the Vikings and the Ravens suck. So that's my summation of
it
today's
seems
podcast.
like a perfect place to leave it, to be honest. Dave on a rant and the pair of them taking the piss out of the Ravens, even though the man that needs to defend himself isn't even here. You're picking on somebody that can't defend himself.
Yeah, but that's because you came and took shots for him on his behalf when we couldn't do anything back. You opened that.
We're not even going to talk about the Ravens next week. We're just going to change the subject.
Yeah. In fact, as soon as Stan turns up, the stock market game don't even exist either.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure dealing with these two reprobates for the last hour. Dave, thank you very much. Jim, thank you very much.
Boys.
You're both a pair of tossers. Goodbye.
Fair.